I wonder if I can, just for a moment, kind of take you back to your childhood. Is that all right? And in your home. And I want to ask a question. What was the loudest voice in your home? And loudest, I mean, in terms of influence, and maybe not necessarily volume. Maybe it was like, your mom says, hey, leave your shoes by the door. And your dad says, oh, don't, worry about that. And then your mom gives you that look and the shoes go by the door. Do you know what I mean? Or dad says it's time to leave and your mom says, hey, you ought to get in the car, and nobody moves. And dad says, get in the car, and then you're in 2 seconds, right? What's the loudest voice in your life? Because the loudest voice in your life shapes the direction of your life. And I think on a day like Father's Day, where some of this, as Gaz has already said earlier on, can be complicated for us, it's true that not just a parent, but the loudest voice in your life will often shape the direction of your life. And today I want to look at a character in the Bible who was a dad, but that's not the main point. And he came face to face with God. And at the moment he came face to face with God, there were so many other voices that were so loud in his head. They were shaping the direction of his life. And then God spoke into his life. And that's where we're going today, because we're looking at this series called Then God. And we're going to have another then God moment. Now, the guy that I want to talk about is quite a famous guy, but in the first part of the Bible called the Old Testament. It's a guy by the name of Moses. So even if you're newer to faith, you might have heard of Moses. You might have seen movies about him. And this is one of the most dramatic stories in the Bible. And I love this story. We're going to dive into it a little bit today. It says this: now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I'll go over and see this strange sight. You're not saying it in like a John Cleese English voice there. It'd be quite funny, wouldn't it? Why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer. God said, take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. That's all the kind of descendants of Abraham. So I'm not just your God, but I'm the God of your ancestors. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. I mean, I cannot understand why he was afraid. Can you? I mean, he's in the wilderness, he's a shepherd, he's doing what he's done every single day. And in this part of the world, there are a lot of bushes on fire all the time, no big deal. But this one doesn't burn up. And when he goes over to have a look, a voice comes from the bush, and the voice says, I am God, and speaks to him. And he's afraid. I mean, who would be afraid? Let me give you some background. Moses, if you don't know the story, was born a Hebrew. He was born a Jew. But it was in an era when the Jews were in captivity in Israel for what was to be 400 years. And Pharaoh was trying to stamp out all of the babies, etc. And so a whole thing went on. And it ended up that Moses was then brought up in the court of Pharaoh. So even though he was a Jew, he was brought up as an Egyptian. When he got to the age of 40, he had an identity crisis. He thought, here's my people all in slavery, and yet I'm being brought up in the court of the king, of the Pharaoh. And so he tried to do something about it. He said, I'm going to set my people free. He tried to do it by killing the Egyptians one at a time. And so he killed this Egyptian soldier, buried the body. It was all found out. Pharaoh went after him. He runs off at 40. He definitely has a midlife crisis. He heads off into the desert where he spends 40 years in the wilderness. He becomes a dad. And then 40 years later, he has this encounter with God. But when God speaks to him, God basically comes in and says, listen, you're in a mess. The people are in a mess. I'm sending you to sort it out. Capiche? He didn't say capiche, all right? That's understand. And basically, Moses looks at him and thinks, listen, I can hear what you're saying to me, but I've got all these other voices that are telling me something different. They're saying, who do you think you are? They're saying, you haven't got what it takes. Look at what you did. Look at your fear. Look at your guilt. Look at your shame. Look at your regret. Look at the fact that you tried to do it, and how did that go? And now 40 years later, you're 40 years older than that as well. And you think you can do something about it. All these voices going on in his head. And that isn't just about a dad. And many of us as fathers have those kind of voices in our head. Comparison voices, not good enough voices. voices that you're a failure, if people knew who you really were, if people knew what you really thought on those quiet moments on your own, if people knew what you really did when no one else was looking. And we've got all these kind of voices. But it's not just for dads. As human beings, I think we all have those kind of competing voices. We have those voices that speak over our lives. Maybe a parent, maybe a carer, maybe a teacher. Anyone got any of those twitches when I say teacher? Remember my history teacher telling my mom and dad, he will never come to anything, is what he said. And that's a terrible thing for a teacher to say. I know. What you say, and he was right. That's what he said over here. And when I did pass the history exam, I so wanted to go back to the teacher and say, but I didn't. Maybe a parent, maybe a pastor, maybe a leader, maybe a partner, maybe a friend, maybe a work colleague, and you've still got that voice in your head. Because let me tell you the truth. Jesus may live in your heart, but who still lives in your head? If you're a person of faith today, Jesus may live in your heart, but for many of us, somebody else lives in our head. And that was true in a way for Moses. Like, he had faith in his heart, but all these other voices were living in his head. And these voices become what the Bible calls a stronghold. Now, a stronghold in ancient times is in a city. A stronghold was a wall. And it was such a thick wall, it was an impenetrable wall around the city. And anyone knew in warfare that if you wanted to take the city, you had to pull down the stronghold. Because if you didn't pull down the stronghold, even if you incurred into the city, the stronghold would always impact you. And so what an army would do is it would not just look at the city, it would look at the stronghold. And if we can tear down the stronghold, then we have a space to enter into the city. And what happens in our life is the strongholds are not walls, they're up here. And the strongholds are created. Now, we know this through science, but the Bible says it anyway. We know it in these kind of ways. It's through early and frequent thinking. Thinking that happens early in our life begins to shape things in us. Then that moves on to what's called repeated thoughts. So those repeated thoughts begin to gain traction. We understand it because we understand neural pathways now, and neuroplasticity, where if you think something enough, it like the synapses in your brain become like grooves. And so what happens is that you begin to think, and those thought patterns begin to be concrete, and they begin to shape, and they begin to strong in your life. Repeated patterns. And then emotional association. If you've got a strong emotion that's associated with something that somebody said or something that happened, that becomes really strong in your life. And then finally, cognitive reinforcement. So what we do, and I see this in pastoral ministry all the time, okay? We look for someone to say what confirms what we already believe. Can't tell you how many people have been to see me and they come for advice. They don't want advice. They want me to tell them what they already believe to be true. That's because all of these things have created pathways in your brain that make you think that that's the truth. And what you want more than anything is someone else to tell you that what you think is the truth is the truth. And it's okay to go and do that because that's what you think anyway. And this is what happens. What we're exposed to determines our thoughts. Our thoughts determine our beliefs determine our behaviors, and our behaviors will shape our lives. And God comes to Moses in this moment, whether you're a person of faith or not, this is true for all of us. He comes to him in this moment and challenges him. And you see, the Bible says something really interesting in the book of Proverbs, which is a book that's written with these little kind of pithy thoughts. He says, one who is wise can go up against the city of the mighty and pull down the stronghold in which they trust. You can pull down the stronghold in your mind. God, who created our brain, created it in such a way that not only is it absolutely amazing, but it can change as well. And just because that's been spoken over you doesn't mean that that is the truth about you. And we can learn what it is to pull down those strongholds. But for Moses, something key is about to happen, because he pushes back. He says, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He says, you're saying this to me, God, but I've got all these other voices in my life, just like you have. Voices like these.
Who do you think you are?
No one will listen to
You'll
you.
never amount to anything.
If only you were more like your
Your
sister.
brother got all
Single.
the brains.
You're just like your dad.
Who would want
Mistake.
you anyway?
Failure.
Who do you think
Loser.
you are?
If only you were more like your sister.
Your brother
Weak.
got all the
You're the
brains.
Who do you
failure.
think you are? Who do you think you
Who would
are?
want you?
No one will
Who do
listen
you
to
You'll
think
you.
never
you are?
amount to
No
anything.
one will
Only you were
listen
more
to
like
Who
your
do you
Failure.
think you are?
Single.
You're
You were
just
more
like
like your
dad.
sister.
No one will listen to
Failure.
you.
Who do you
never
think
amount
you
to
are?
anything.
No one
Only
will
you were
listen
more
to
like
Who do
you
you
were
think
more
you
like
are?
your
God said. What did God say? Here's what our culture would think God would say at that point. That God would say something like this: you got this. You're enough. You're awesome. You will smash it. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but that's not what God said. We need to be it's really, really important to get so sucked into our cultural narrative that we think that's what God said. God didn't say any of those things. God said this: I will be with you. You know, he didn't say anything about Moses. He said everything about himself. I will be with you. Put your hand up like that for me for a minute. You've got 5 fingers. I will be with you. Or another way, God will be with me. I wonder how many of us, when you go into work this week, when you go home, when you go into a situation, when you're on your own, need just maybe just to look at your hand and saying, God will be with me. Come on. Now I've got this. Not because of me, but because of who is with me. And that's an incredible thing, I think. You know, because before God changes his future, he changes the conversation. Before an assignment, he talks about identity. And God says, I need to be the one that has the final word. If ever you were invited to see the King Charles, you'd be taught, not that this has ever happened to me or probably ever will, but you'd be taught about etiquette. And one of the etiquettes apparently when you meet in monarchy is that you don't have the final word, all right? So you'd be instructed on how to talk to the king, and you'd do that, and you'd bow or you curtsy or whatever. He would talk to you, you would look interested and talk back. How many of you, as the king goes to walk off down the line, would say, "Oi, Charlie, one more thing"? A, you wouldn't call him Charlie, all right? And B, you wouldn't have the final word. And yet Moses did. Because Moses said this. Moses answered, what if they didn't believe me? See, the stronghold is still in his thoughts. He's so strong. You know, I will be with you wasn't enough. And he pushes back and says, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him in Exodus 4, verse 2, then the Lord said, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. And I love this. So he's got the shepherd's staff in his hand. This is the staff that later, if you know the story, he's going to stand in front of the Red Sea and he's going to hold this staff out. And God then is going to miraculously move the sea apart for 2 or 3 million people to head out of captivity and towards the promised land. This is the staff that is going to strike on a stone and in the desert, and water is going to miraculously flow from this staff. But at that moment, it's just his shepherd's staff. And God says, what's that in your hand? And he says, a staff. And then God says, throw it to the ground. So he throws it to the ground and it turns into a snake. Oh, this is a great story, by the way. And then God says, pick the snake up by the tail. Which you never ever do. I don't know a lot about snakes, but I know you never pick them up by the tail because the venom is in the head. He picks it up by the tail and it turns into a staff again. And before this moment, it was always called Moses' staff. After this moment, it's always called the staff of God. And years ago, God really spoke to me about this. And God said to me this, I felt, that staff represented for Moses his identity. It represents who he thinks he is. And whether that's a good or a bad thing, God is showing him at that moment that if you hold on to it too tight, it has the potential to become a snake and turn and bite you. But if you surrender it to him, I will deal with the venom part. And if I give it back to you, it now is not just yours, but now it is mine in your hand. And I wonder how many of us, with our thinking, are holding on to our thinking like it's our stuff and it's our identity. And if we let this go, who are we? I'll tell you who you are. If you don't let it go, it has the potential to become a snake that can turn and bite you. But if you do let it go and trust God, then actually when it comes back to you, it's going to come back not as yours, but as his. You see, with God, it's always availability before capability. And I wonder how many of us on this Father's Day need maybe just to say, God, here's my life. No matter what the voices are in my head, no matter what has been said or spoken over me, I am going to let that go. I don't want to hold on to it so tight that it could become a snake that could turn and bite me. but I want it to be something. I want my life to be something in your hands. And that stronghold begins to get broken in Moses. He goes on not just to be a great father, but to be a father of a nation. And the rest, as they say, is history. So let me give you some points of application today. What do we do? Whether you're a father or not, whether you're a person of faith or not, the first thing that we need to do is to recognize the voices. We need to recognize those voices in our mind. You know, before God spoke to Moses, Moses had been listening to failure and shame and rejection. And so the question that I have for you to think about this week is, what voice has been shaping your thinking lately? And check that voice, because everyone listens to someone. You might think, well, you're not a person of faith, and you say, I'm not interested in all this God stuff. You're being shaped by a voice, all right? You might think we're a little bit crazy, believing in a voice that we can't see. You're being shaped by a voice as well. Everyone's listening to someone. So what voice has been shaping your thinking lately? But secondly, what you and I need to do is we need to adjust the volume. Because here's the thing, all these voices in there, we can't sometimes get rid of them. What we need to do is to adjust the volume. We need to turn down those voices in the mix and make sure that the voice of the person who we need to hear the most is the loudest in the mix. So that critical father, that absent father, that disappointed parent, that friend that you fell out with, all those voices crowd around. What we need to do is we need to adjust the volume. I'm going to ask Ben to help me. So Ben's going to start to play, and you'll hear the music in the background, then you'll hear my voice. And that's because Gareth on the sound desk is controlling my voice. But if the voice of the music was to get louder and my voice was to get quieter, eventually what would happen is that you'd hear the music of the... You can't hear my voice. But then if it was to adjust it again and the music was to go down and my voice was to go up, the music is still there, but now my voice is the loudest in the mix. Can I just say, my voice doesn't need to be the loudest one you hear in your head, okay? But God's does. But God's does. And I wonder how many of us just need to learn to adjust the volume. So when those voices get up, say, oh, what have you said about me, God? What have you said about me? And that's the question. What has God said about me? Because what God has said about you is the truth. It's the truth. We might hear those other voices in the mix, but when we make sure that His is the loudest voice we hear, I think that's when the stronghold will start to get broken. And thirdly, use your voice well. You know, I love this. God didn't just break this stronghold in Moses' mind just to make Moses feel better. It's because Moses had a voice for a nation and for people around him. Use your voice well. You know, words carry weight, don't they? And on a day like Father's Day, it's a great opportunity, guys, and for all of us really, maybe just to use our words well. And if there's anybody in your life who's been like a father type figure, who's invested, who's resourced, who's encouraged you, why don't you tell them? Why don't you use your voice well to encourage and to thank? Let me tell you, so often we pour out and we all try to do our best. Very often you don't get a lot back. And that's really discouraging. Use your voice well. And then finally, I don't know whether any of you remember the first Jurassic Park film. Anyone remember the first Jurassic Park film? And when the T-Rex is set free, and this great scene here, and there's a moment in the first movie where this lawyer, let me get his name, I forgot his name there, Donald Gennaro, he's supposed to look after the kids. And instead he abandons the kids and he goes and sits in a toilet cubicle. And the kids are in fear. And then the guy gets eaten by the T-Rex, which in my mind was justice, because he shouldn't have abandoned the kids, basically. But that's a bit gruesome. Anyway, and then later, the star, here he is, the next picture, Sam Neill, Dr. Alan Grant, he comes into the kids and he says, you'll be all right, mate, I'm going to stick with you. And they said, yeah, but that fella said that. And he let us down. And he said this, I am not going to leave you. Said exactly the same thing that God said to Moses, I will be with you. So I don't know what you're facing right now in your life. I don't know what situation you're at. But then God spoke and he said, I will be with you. Let that voice be the loudest voice that you hear. I wonder if we can pray together. If you're willing and able, would you stand? And I just wonder on this day, Father's Day, whether there are some of us that as we face our own maybe little burning bush moment, could be honest enough to recognize some of those voices that are still shaping our life now. You know, I'm a grandfather now, but some of the voices I heard as a kid, if I'm not careful, you know, they'll shape my life. They'll shape the direction for good or not for good. So this isn't about an age thing, and this isn't about a gender thing neither. Because how many ladies here are being shaped by voices that they've heard? And I wonder if today we could say, God, and invite God by His Spirit to bring the voice of God into our life, that His voice will be the loudest voice that we hear. I'd love to pray for you today. So let's pray. Maybe if that's you today and you say, hey, that's me, maybe just do something in your own heart, in your own mind. Maybe just put your hands out in front of you if that helps you. Just to say, God, would you speak to me? Would you let your voice be the loudest voice that I hear? Lord, help me to recognize those voices that have shaped and are shaping me. My thoughts, my behaviors, my actions, my reactions. And Lord, help me to adjust that volume so that the next time I hear all those voices coming up in the mix, I say, that's what that is. I'm going to turn that down. And I'm going to turn up the voice of the one that matters the most, which is the voice of God. And then, Lord, let me use my voice well this week. I wonder how many of us would go out of this place thinking, how can I use my voice well to encourage somebody else this week? You know, whether you're a person of faith or not, you can do that. And in fact, I want to encourage you and challenge you to do that. See how different you feel when you use your voice well, let alone those people that you encourage with your voice. And Lord, through it all, Father, I pray that every single one of us will know that those words you said over Moses, you also say over us. When Jesus gave that great commission, that last thing that He said to His church, He said, go into all the world, preach the gospel, and I will be with you always to the end of the age. I will be with you. God will be with me. That's all we need to know as we step forward. Before assignment comes identity. So God, I pray that today, on this day, we will go out of this place with these words that we're about to sing ringing in our ears and in our heart. I am a child of God. And God, I pray that every single one of us will know what that is in Jesus' name. Amen. Can I just say, if you're still checking out faith, and I know many of you are, keep checking it out. Keep exploring, keep coming back to Alpha. We'll be at Alpha again tomorrow night. If you've been on that or you missed a few weeks, come again tomorrow. Keep putting yourself back in that space where you hear the voice that matters the most. This song that we're going to sing, we're just going to sing a little bit of it as we finish. And I wanted to keep it simple so that we can dwell in the richness of these words. I'm no longer a slave to fear. Is that true for anyone? I am no longer a slave to fear. And you could fill in the blank on that. I'm no longer a slave to criticism. I'm no longer a slave to addiction. I'm no longer a slave to disapproval. I'm no longer a slave to abandonment. I'm no longer a slave to rejection. I'm no longer a slave to bitterness. I'm no longer a slave to divorce. I'm no longer a slave to whatever it is. I am a child of God. Isn't that amazing? Let's sing and let's celebrate.